Hi guys, my name is Liam Martin. Welcome to my first Keyshot tutorial. If you haven't checked out already, the introduction video I've just posted gives you some idea of what's going to happen on this channel. But this is my first Keyshot tutorial and it's going to be based on creating floating dust in the environment on Keyshot. The reason you want to do this is to add some imperfection into the scene. So generally speaking with renders, they look unrealistic because they're too perfect. So by adding things like this, you can really make your render seem more like real life. Okay, so we're only using standard tools within Keyshot today, no external polygon textures or anything like that. So theoretically, anyone with Keyshot 8 should be able to do this. Let's jump into the software to see how it looks. Okay, so within Keyshot, I've made this simple scene to show off the dust effect later down the line. I've got this glass ball at the center that's 300mm in diameter to give you some idea of scale. If I go to my free camera, I'll show you the spotlight that's also pointing at this glass ball. That's going to help to illuminate some of the dust around it. We've also got these two planes that are outputting this image as light. They're emissive materials, so they're also going to help to illuminate some of the dust in this scene. To get started, go to Edit, Add Geometry, and add in a cube. If I go over to my scene and increase the scale, what this is going to do is hold all of the dust. Okay, so you want to make sure that anywhere you want dust, which generally is the whole scene, definitely around the camera, make sure that your cube sort of covers the whole thing. From there, double click on the cube to bring up the cube material. We're going to change it to a transparent plastic. We're going to change the diffuse to an off-white, so I'm using nearly white, and then I'm pumping a little bit of orange in there to get this sort of beige. We're going to go to the roughness and change the roughness to 0.5. We can leave the specular, the diffuse transmission and specular transmission as they are, and the refractive index you can play around with it, but I found 1.5 works well for the dust effect. From there, if we go to the material graph, right click anywhere, go to geometry and flakes. That's going to bring in the Flakes module. Okay, so this is what we're going to use to generate our dust particles. No, we're not using scattering medium because I find it quite hard to work with, and I feel like with Flakes you get more control over the dust effect. From there, what you want to do is input the Flakes module into the geometry of the cube material and then double click on the Flakes. Okay, from here you want to input these settings, so I find that 0.5 works well for the size. We have 0.5 in size variation. The density is going to depend on your scene, so if you want something that's really dusty, go for a higher density than me, but I'm going to go for something which is more noticeable than it should be in most scenes, but it shows off the effect really well. Below that is flake limit, which is measured in millions, so this is how many millions max flakes you're going to get. I'm just going to set this at 1. If you go for a really dense scene, you might need to increase this, okay, so to allow for more flakes. Play around with these and get used to them and find something that's best for your scene. When you're ready, hit execute geometry node and you'll see the cube in the background is now gone, and what's left, you'll see as I move around, is all these very, very small flakes which are going to act as dust. I've set up this camera that you saw at the start, which is looking right at the sphere, and you can see some of the flakes here and they look quite large. Don't be put off by this. The reason they look so large is because they're so close to the lens, and because I haven't added any depth of field to the lens yet, they're all essentially in focus. So next thing to do, and this is how the dust effect works really well, is go to your camera, tick depth of field, make sure your focal point is your subject in your scene, and then adjust your f-stop accordingly so you start to make these out of focus. So I'm going to bring it down by a factor of 10. Okay, so now they're just about out of focus. I'm going to drop it down a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so if I hit Control, Shift and R to go to render region and focus on some of these, for example this one, as it renders out, you'll see the kind of effect you're getting. You get this sort of translucent white dots for the ones that are close to the camera, and you can still see the particles that are close to the ball that are in focus. They're really small, and it just adds a lot of contrast between these two, which is I think why the effect works so well. I'm just going to hit Control Shift and R to exit this view and lock my camera and save it. The next thing to think about is outputting this as a render. Normally I recommend to my students using maximum samples and just lets Keyshot do the work for you. But as soon as you get something where depth of field is really important to the quality of your render, you want to come to custom control and you want to make sure this depth of field meter here is at least 5. If you want something, if you want better quality, go higher, but note that this will add significantly to your render time. This is an image that I posted on my Instagram and one of the renders that I output using exactly the same dust method. You can see once it's rendered out, these become really nice to look at in the foreground. It's probably still too dust intense, there's too much dust in there, but I think the effect works really well. If I go over to this image as well, you'll see what it looks like, and this is kind of an ideal scenario for when I'd use this effect. If we've got a piece of furniture or you're doing a render of a room and there's lots of light coming in, put some dust in there so you get these little specks, and it adds a lot to your render without adding imperfections to your product itself. Okay guys, that's the end of the tutorial. Hopefully there wasn't anything too complicated in there for you to be able to replicate it at home. If you do find a better method of making dust, please get in touch with me and I could always look at making another video later on down the line. But for now, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video.